Hello and welcome, Shemai Croisway, to the penultimate panel of the Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival. It's been a brilliant series of events so far, and that is partly in thanks to the generous support of the Welsh Government. I'm Paul Burke, and I write about crime fiction for magazines and websites. And I suppose most relevant to this is the fact that I interview crime authors for Crime Time FM podcast. Now, one of the most enjoyable aspects of that, and I hope it was entertaining for everybody else, was that I covered the inaugural Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival in Aberystwyth last year, and of course it'll be live again there next year. But more about that later. So, to our pen to pod panel, and to our guests, Abir Mukherjee and Vaseem Khan, two of the leading lights of British crime fiction, and of course co-presenters of the Red Hot Chilli Writers podcast. Abir is author of the Wyndham and Banerjee series, set in Rajgiriya, India, and has a new thriller coming out next month called Hunted, and we'll be talking more about that later, I'm sure, too. Vaseem Khan is chair of the Crime Writers Association and author of the Baby Ganesh series, as well as the Persis Wadia series, which is set in newly independent India. His latest novel, Death of a Lesser God, is out now in paperback. Both are winners of CWA Dagger Awards, and have an array of prize nominations and shortlistings between them. So let's crack on. Welcome, Vaseem, and welcome, Abir.
Thank you, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Right. Well, let's start. Okay. I have this kind of crazy theory that, rock stars want to be footballers or cricketers, Vaz. and, and footballers want to be rock stars. How about writers want to be podcasters? Or am I getting a bit deluded there?
Well, I'd start by saying only the absolute saddos of writing decide that they'd prefer to be podcasters compared to, say, rock stars, which is why the pair of us started our podcast.
Well, here's a question, Vas. Do you play any instruments? Because if we were going to be a rock band, then we'd have to play something. What would you play?
Me, I'd play, oh gosh, bloody good on the tambourine.
Yeah, I reckon, Paul, Vas has got a washboard stomach, so you could play your stomach. You play the washboard, right?
I'd be drums because you can make a lot of noise doing that. I'd be happy.
Drums, right. So we've got drums, we've got washboard.
You'd be the lead guitarist, wouldn't you?
I'd lead spoons. I'd be on the spoons on my knee. Or I could learn the banjo. I've always wanted to learn the banjo because I think it's a sort of easier guitar, isn't it? I shouldn't say that in case there are some irate banjo aficionados out there.
I suppose you're really asking, Paul, is why the hell did we bother to start a podcast?
That's absolutely it. Why? Go on, tell us.
Well, I mean, middle-aged men love the sound of their own voices, don't they? And they particularly love, even more than that, the idea that there are people out there who will be interested in what they have to say. And the benefit of a podcast is that nobody can answer back, so you can pontificate as we tend to do for as long as you like.
Well, there's two things I would add to that. One,
I've noticed you've got a pontificating section, by the way. Sorry, Abir.
No, that's all right. There's just two things I would sort of add to that. It's not just middle-aged men; it's young men like me too who enjoy listening to the sounds of their own voices.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing.
And secondly, Vas edits each episode to make him look smarter than he really is.
Yeah, but you see,
it takes a lot of editing, doesn't it, Vas?
There's a lot behind this, isn't there? Because because Vaz does all the work. You do the glamour stuff, and he does all the work behind the scenes. Is that right?
I think that's rather harsh. But Vas, what would you say? Is that true?
It's very harsh because, I mean, that's not a face for glamour, is it? And I do edit the podcast, but I edit it to make Abir, to cut out some of Abir's inanities. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's a fair question, Paul. Basically, Vaseem does the work. He puts in the effort. He does all the donkey work. He invites 90% of the guests. I rock up on the day and wing it. And you can't tell because, it's just seamless, isn't it, Vas?
Yeah, like your trousers. Your padded suit. No, look, we have a lot of fun on it, and we have fun because I think we understand that what we're doing is, it's not about us. It's about the wonderful guests that we have on. It's about the fact that we love crime fiction, but we also have, I think, a healthy interest in other aspects of the world, which is why we'll always find some crazy story to talk about. We'll occasionally get quite political. We'll chew the fat with our guests. We'll put them in embarrassing and uncomfortable positions, but that's all part of the fun, I think. And we do try and keep it fun.
Yeah, no, you do try and keep well, you do keep it fun, actually, to be fair. All right, then. I mean, it's not a political question. It's not exactly zeitgeisty or topic of the day, but I'm just curious about something. Let's start with a topic because that's what you do on your podcast.
Mm.
Lee Charles had this list of how to write a perfect thriller, and he sat down and he said, I'm going to do these 10 things, and bam, it worked. Can you work that way? Can you sort of come up with a recipe for a hit book, or is it something more than that?
Oh, I've got the perfect recipe, but let's hear what Abir has to say first.
Well, I want to see this recipe. I want to see Lee Charles' recipe because obviously, no, I think writing a book's a bit like making an omelette blindfolded. You know the ingredients, but every time you do it, it comes out different. It's a really bad analogy, wasn't that, Vass? Yeah, but
You're good at
I
that.
don't. I don't know if you can write the perfect thriller.
All right, then. Are there a couple of things, or are there sort of few things that you kind of think I must do this when I'm writing this book?
Well, that's a good question. What do you think, Vass?
Well, let me give you the magic ingredient first, and then we'll do the proper one.
To be fair, Vass's wife writes his books, so
she's bloody good at them, and
she is. She's getting better.
Me much. I get to
I'll
keep
give her that. She is getting better.
Okay. If you want to write in this day and age, if you want a bestseller, this is what you do. You find yourself a massively famous celebrity with a huge platform. You get them to write a book. You get someone to write it for them. Then you spend £1 million in marketing, and there you go. You've got a bestseller on your hands. That's all you had to do.
That sounded a wee bit political. That sounded like Vass was a wee bit upset there.
No, to be honest with you, no. To be honest with you, I think most celebrities get an unfair rap because many of them write their own material and they're bloody good at it. And
no, I disagree.
They have
I
as much
disagree.
right.
I think there are certain ones. I think there are certain ones that are very good. I think Richard Osman being one. But you can count them on the fingers of one hand, Vass. You can count the good ones.
It's an open industry. No one should.
It is, but they're not. Half of them aren't writing it.
Yeah, that's a different story. When someone doesn't write it and doesn't tell you up front that they don't write it, that's a different issue.
Yeah, but it's basically brand recognition, right? And the question I would ask readers is, just because somebody can dance, right? Why do you think they'd be as good at writing a book as, say, Denise Mina or Mick Herron, just because they're famous for something else? I mean, I have tried my hand at brain surgery. It hasn't worked out so well. So, skills aren't always transferable just because you're good at one thing. And yet we see a famous person, and maybe it's just because we can picture them, but, they have an advantage over the rest of us in terms of brand recognition.
And you can't dance either, so that doesn't help.
Sorry?
You can't dance either, so that doesn't help.
No, exactly. I can't dance, can't play the banjo. Our band is doing really badly. Although if we were going to have a boy band, would you be in it?
I don't think I qualify any longer.
Well, you know what? Can I tell you what we're going to call it?
Go on then.
Testosterone. Which I think I've trademarked, and we are going to do this, aren't we, Vass?
We are, but I don't think you should be hard on yourself because
I'm not, never am.
Well, group, not you, Paul.
Paul, right?
You deserve other people being hard on you, but the Backstreet Boys are still touring, and
I suppose that's true.
Yeah, half of them are in wheelchairs. One of them's got kidney problems. It's all sorts.
Backstreet's back, all right.
Yeah,
as they say. Sorry, Paul, we've gone completely off topic.
No, it's perfectly fine. I wasn't under any kind of delusion that this was going to go the way I wanted it to go in the first place anyway. I'm not that stupid. All right, let's try. So I tell you what, we'll get you talking about something you really do want to talk about. How about you tell us a little bit about Hunted, Abir?
I mean, no, we'll come to that.
Your novel coming out in what, a month's
we can
time?
talk about this plenty of times.
Come on.
No, you tell them about it, Vass. You've read it.
Oh, okay, I'll tell.
If you don't tell us, I'll tell them a bad joke. Somebody else does that.
I'm very into my bad jokes. Can I tell a joke?
I'm gonna be.
You have to.
No, first I'm gonna be your publicist.
Okay, go on.
There we go.
That's not even what it looks like.
Okay.
That's better.
That's the one I've got too.
I haven't got the actual one, have I?
Oh,
the pretty one.
Like.
Proper hardback.
This is Abir's latest book, and it's a brilliant thriller, and it's a chase thriller. So it starts off in the UK, and then the action moves to America, and it's about a man whose child and a woman whose son possibly were involved in a terrorist incident in America, and it's election year, so you've got all of that amazing stuff going into the mix, and then the two parents decide that their kids are in danger. They don't believe that they've been involved in this, and so they decide to journey to America to try and figure out what the bloody hell is going on. And
Geez, that sounds good. I might read that.
it is bloody good. And you know what? A friend of mine wrote it.
He must be really nice. Whoever wrote it, he must be a really good friend to give you a copy early.
Yeah, but you wouldn't give one to Phil Williams, would you?
Well, he's got 3 now, apparently. Well, we sent him 3.
They've all turned up, have they?
I don't know if they've turned up. I think he's running some sort of cottage industry.
Well, I tell you what he's busy
reselling books.
No, I tell you what he's doing. He's busy stealing Tupperware. Do you not know of Williams' penchant for stealing people's Tupperware?
No, tell us this. Tell us this.
Oh, it's a terrible story. So we were at or at least I was in Bradford at my friend Amit Dan's house, who's another great writer, and Phil and he are great friends. And I met Phil then. We had a lovely chat, and then it turned out the next day that the Tupperware had gone missing. And then Phil got
and it
back.
wasn't you.
It wasn't me. And then it turned out that Phil had either been given this Tupperware and failed to return it on time, and he was profusely apologetic, but I'm not having it. I'm sorry.
I'm a bit concerned.
Right, well, he's damned in public now. That's out there. That's out there for the world to see. So
he'll never live that down. He never will. Can I
ask another serious question?
Yes, go on, ask a serious question.
Okay, serious question. Were you kind of thinking about flipping tropes with the book? I mean, given the subject matter.
In terms of, I suppose, look, I'll tell you why. Sorry, carry on.
No, go on, you.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book for several reasons. One, I always write about stuff that is angering me at any one time. And when I started writing this book, it was about radicalization. It was about essentially polarization of our politics and the rise of populism, which I thought offered simple answers to very, very complex questions. And, not more often than not, almost always those answers that are provided are nonsense. They basically make you feel
stereotypical. That's what I meant.
Well, they provide a bit of an ego boost for a while, but they don't solve anything. And we've seen that in the UK, we've seen it in America, and this worried me. And so I wanted to write about that. At the same time, I was asked by my editor, "What's your greatest fear?" And my greatest fear is around my children. If my children were involved in something that I could not protect them from, that is my biggest fear as a parent. And so this book is about, ordinary people being thrown into this extraordinary situation of having to try and find and rescue their kids before, who've been accused of something terrible, before they can be, either shot or captured or worse, used by malevolent forces. And that's really what the book is about, because I think for many of us, that is our greatest fear. Our fears are for our kids, especially in the way the world's going. And I wanted to change. I wanted to change from writing the Wyndham books, which I'm writing more of. But after 5, and I know Vaseem was the same. You did, your Malabar House series, which is great and was getting, so popular. You decided you needed a change for a while as well, and you've written another series. So I think most writers, if you're going to stay at the top of your game, if you're going to improve, I think you need to keep things fresh. And when I started writing this book, I wanted to do something fresh, but it took me a very long time to figure out how to do it. I'm a writer of historical fiction, and suddenly I'm writing this thriller, and it took a good 2 years to get it right, which is a lot longer than normal. It's about double the time it normally takes me to get a book right in terms of the first draft. In all, it was about 3 years. But I'm happy with it now, and fingers crossed people will like it.
Yeah, and you can go back to Wyndham and Banerjee fresher.
I am. I've got number 6 almost done now, first draft, so that'll come out next year.
Now, Vaz, you have a book coming out next year as well. I know you don't want to particularly talk about that one, but you've got another change of tack coming as well. But what about, Death of a Lesser God? Tell us about Death of a Lesser God, please. It's just out in paperback, isn't it?
I will. Although I have to say, your last comment. The word fresh has not been used around Abir for a very long time. It doesn't made very often. Well, I'm sorry to burst the bubble.
You hear that? I'll take a shower once.
I need to practice I need to practice more, don't I?
I'll take a shower whether I need it or not. Ah, look at that beauty.
Okay, so Death of a Leather God now out in paperback. So it is it's a fourth in the Malabar House novel. So just to center people on this, so it's the 1950s, just a couple of years after Indian independence. The horrors of partition. Gandhi's been assassinated. India's trying to work out what kind of country it's going to be. It's, it's very, very turbulent. But there are still tens of thousands of Brits and foreigners in the country because they either were born there, grew up there, or they just didn't want to go back to cold, wet, miserable England. And I can't blame them. I've got the heaters on and it's bloody April now.
Well, it's different in Wales, but I get your point.
So in Death of a Lesser God, what we've got is we have another inverted narrative. We have a white man, James Whitby, who was born and grew up in India, so he's technically an Indian, but obviously he's also an Englishman, and he's been convicted of murdering an Indian nationalist lawyer. 11 days left before he's hanged, and then his father forces through a last-minute reinvestigation, and so we follow my protagonist, which is India's first female police detective, Persis, and an Englishman, a forensic scientist called Archie Blackfinch, who's out there helping the Bombay police set up their own forensic science lab. And we follow them as they investigate the case. And then it leads them from Bombay to Calcutta, which was the original home of the British Empire in India, the first colonial capital. And so we get to explore Calcutta, which Abir has done amazingly well in his Wyndham series. So a lot of fun writing that. And like Abir, I try and bring this dual perspective. So, we have lots of history about the Raj and not so much about the period after, which I'm looking at. But most of that history's come from white historians, and nothing wrong with that. I use some of those textbooks to get my research. But people like Abir and I have that dual perspective. We have the heritage from the subcontinent, so we look for other sources. I've lived there for a decade, and so we try and bring some of that dual and more balanced narrative to the piece. And yeah, people seem to enjoy these books. I'm busy polishing off a fifth one in the series, which will come out after the book that you mentioned, which is an experiment for next year.
Right. See,
wait a minute. It's not an experiment. It's a phenomenal book, and it's a psychological thriller. And Vaseem has discussed it with me, and I've seen passages of it, and it's really, really good.
Well, it's nice of you to say.
So a good one to look forward to then.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a girl in cell A, isn't it?
Pains me to say it, but it's brilliant.
Okay, well, I'll give you the 30-second pitch, people, so that you can be advanced readers for this. So as Abir rightly said, I think all writers, and it doesn't matter how famous you are, how successful, you need to do different things. It's lovely to sink back into the same characters of a series that's quite popular, and it's nice having that safety net, but at the same time, you occasionally want to stretch yourself. So I love small town America fiction, whether it's on film or on screen. And I love psychological thrillers. And so I thought I'd combine those. So this book is set in a small town called Eden Falls, which I made up in America. And it's about a girl who's convicted of murdering the heir to a wealthy family in this small mining town. She goes to prison for 17 years. She's convinced she didn't do it. There are holes in her memory. And then she returns to figure out exactly what happened. And so we have all of those lovely things that go into psychological thrillers. We have dual narrators. We have unreliable narrators. We have all sorts of sort of psychological things going on in the background and suspense.
So very different from what you're writing now.
Very different. And yeah, it's called The Girl in Cell A because, that's who she became known as. And as Abir said, it's quite tough when you're on one track for several novels and then you have to try and write in a completely different way and style. So like him, it's taken me longer than anticipated, which is why it's not coming out this August, but it's coming out next spring.
Right.
But I believe that pre-orders are up. So by all means, help me along, people.
There you go. First advert in there today. Okay, then let's talk about the stuff that people do know, because you both got these series out there. I mean, you're a podcasting duo. And one of the things that's really important about your series is you've got Wyndham and Banerjee in your series of Beer. You've got Persis Wadia and Archie Blackfinch in yours, Vaseem. Tell us a little bit about that relationship, but also in relation to what you said a little bit earlier, Vaseem, actually, about how that reflects on the culture and the politics. Who wants to start?
Well, let's start with Abir.
Oh gosh. Yeah, well, with Wyndham and Banerjee, they came to me very, very quickly, and they came to me together when I started writing this series. Wyndham arrived, and I think Banerjee arrived 2 minutes after him. For those of you who haven't read my books, they're set in colonial India in the 20s, centered on Calcutta generally, and they feature an ex-Scotland Yard detective called Sam Wyndham and an Indian sergeant called Surendranath Banerjee. But being British, his colleagues can't pronounce Surendranath, so he's called Surendranath. And the books really examine the closing years of empire. They will examine the period from 1920 to 1947, assuming I live that long. But right now we're up to about 1926.
I was going to say, we've got a way to go.
Well, yeah, and I'm from Glasgow, so there's a fair chance I won't make it to the end of this interview, let alone, another 20 years. But essentially, we're looking at that period, the end of the British Raj. And I started writing the series, as I say, out of anger and frustration at one side of history that we don't really explore or look at. And the more I've looked at this period, the more I've looked at these, I've examined the history, the more I think we should examine it, because it's not all bad. We always see the Raj as being, tea on the Viceroy's lawn. We look at it with rose-tinted spectacles, and there is a very different side to it, which we do not discuss. We do not talk about. At least when I was growing up, we didn't talk about the evils of empire. But there was a very special relationship between the British and the Indians that led to, the world's first non-violent freedom struggle. And I wanted to explore that. And I think we're seeing, even today, we are seeing the ramifications of that. The fact that, and Vass and I have discussed this, this is a very tolerant country. We're not perfect by any means, but there is a tolerance, which means that, people like Vass and myself, second generation British people whose parents came from the Indian subcontinent, we have, decent life chances and opportunities far better than, say, the vast majority of, second generation Algerians growing up in France. And a lot of that is to do with the way empire finished. The British, when they left, because of Gandhi and the non-violent movement, they left in a way which wasn't as toxic as the way the French left places like Algeria or Indochina. The French police were still massacring Algerians in Paris in the 60s. And so that legacy of tolerance and that legacy of leaving in a way which was almost amicable. I know there are lots of problems with it, but it's paved the way, I think, for a situation where today we have an ethnic minority prime minister, which will not happen in France as long as I'm alive. And I know I'm from Glasgow, but I don't think in Vaseem's life either. So that period's really interesting, and that's really why I wanted to explore it. In terms of the characters, they're both two sides of my personality. Sam is my British half, he's my older half, my more wizened half. And Suren is my Indian half, my curious side, my younger side. And the conversations that they have are often the conversations that are in my own head. And I think anybody who sits between two cultures has that dual narrative. Wouldn't you say, Vass?
Yeah, absolutely. You forgot to say that Surendranath has got your chicken legs.
He has got my legs, but I've been going to the gym, Vass. My legs are getting bigger now. Scary.
Your ass is getting bigger. Your gluteus.
You told me you wouldn't tell anybody that.
Shall I come back later?
Please don't leave. Please don't leave.
A lot of what Abir says is absolutely correct. I think what's been fascinating for me is, so, we both have lots of writers in India, but we have many more writers in Western markets, in Britain, in Australia, in America. And the fact that they're so, and they write to us all the time, and the fact that they're so intrigued by this colonial history and post-colonial history, I think hints at a really strong and healthy appetite for all of us to want to know a bit more about colonialism, and not to just sort of cut it off and say, okay, it was what it was, but try and learn from it, learn the lessons from the past. And what we do, I think, is we go into it from a slightly different perspective. And by doing that, we are able to present things that perhaps, I think both of us coincidentally mentioned in our books the fact that the fingerprint classification system was invented by a pair of Indians in Calcutta, in Bengal, and then it was transported to Scotland Yard.
Where it was claimed, of course, instantly.
Well, I mean, their
as a British
supervisor,
invention.
well, to be fair, their supervisor was called a man called Henry, and because of that, in those days, if your supervisor was British, he got the credit. So he was only
He also got to be, chief of Scotland Yard because of it. But yeah, the work was done by, two Bengalis, one a Hindu, the other a Muslim, which I think is fascinating. Chandra Bose and Azizul Haq, which is amazing, and it's something we've forgotten about. We don't know these things.
Yeah. And when it comes to the characters, I mean, there's Persis is an Indian who's gone through the Indian movement, and she's a very, determined lady because she's the first woman to qualify for the Indian police service as an inspector, and nobody wants her there, so they shove her in Bombay's smallest police station with all the other rejects and misfits. It's a station called Malabar House, hence the title of the series, and the first book, Midnight at Malabar House. And then she's forced to work with Archie Blackfinch, who wasn't part of the Raj, but he's come out there as an Englishman, and clearly he's tainted by the acts of his predecessors on the subcontinent. But like any good crime series, I guess there's a will they won't they vibe when you have a pair of characters like that, and they are drawn to each other. But at the same time, Persis knows, how the hell can she possibly have any kind of relationship, long-term relationship with an Englishman? And so I think that drives and powers the narrative to a great extent as we move through this partnership.
Yeah. You know what? Something you said there about that, because I think if you look at, I think anyway, in my opinion, that thrillers, a lot of it, when it comes down to series, people come back for the characters as much as they come for mysteries, don't they? Yeah, and you both got these sets of heroes, that we love and we want to come back and we want to find out about that. Now, Abir, you mentioned there, thinking about this series in really long-term sort of approach to it. Did you actually have a sort of arc for these characters, or is it organic? Does it come along as you get the books, as you start thinking about the ideas and that?
I think you had. I mean, I had a very vague notion of what I wanted to happen. I wanted, I needed a damaged Englishman or damaged Brit in Sam, who is almost, he finds salvation in India. And I knew that's what I wanted to happen. At the same time, I wanted his younger sidekick, Suran, who's actually cleverer than him, but because of the system they work in, is always going to be the junior partner. I wanted him to awaken into the cause of Indian independence. I didn't know what period those things would take. I mean, I expected Suran to not really evolve till the 30s, so about 10 books in. But by book 4, he was already having this political awakening, which I didn't figure on at the beginning. I certainly didn't figure on when I started that 4th novel. And suddenly he was a very different character, and he has evolved. So yes, I knew roughly where I wanted them to go, but they have evolved in a way that I did not expect. And that to me is a big surprise. It's great, when your characters start doing things you didn't anticipate. It's a bit of a strange one, but it's worked well, and I'm enjoying it. But as you say, yeah, we read we read books for the characters. I will buy every Rebus novel. It doesn't matter what the plot is. I will buy it because I'm invested and I love the character.
Yeah, absolutely. Vaz?
Yeah, completely agree with that. And I think readers know this. They know this already because we all those of us who love crime fiction, we follow several series. And with the best will in the world, even our favorite writers, every plot isn't stellar. It's impossible. It's impossible that every single plot that you write in a long-running series is going to be.
I mean, yeah, different ones will appeal to different people.
Right.
Exactly. Different ones will appeal to different people. But because we love spending time with those characters, we're willing to forgive. We're willing to sort of slide over the odd plot hole or the odd inconsistency. And I think that's the joy of crime fiction, because you get to talk about you get to pontificate, as we love to do, about the world, about issues that we care about, but you get to do it through this charming device of a mystery that's an intellectual challenge for the readers, and at the same time, it's told through the eyes and the actions of these characters that we love to create, and hopefully readers also fall in love with.
All right, and here's a kind of podcast question related to that. And you'd know this if you read your emails, Abir.
It's all right.
No.
Vaseem read my emails. It's okay.
No, I was going to say, look, you've got Sam or you've got Surendranath, you've got Persis, and you've got Archie. If you could ask them a question, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, given that Vaseem's prepared, I think he should go first while I think of an
This
answer.
question wasn't on the list.
It wasn't on the list. I lied.
Oh, you're just trying
I'll
to
make
make
that
me
up,
feel
my
bad
friend.
anyway.
I'm going
Go
to
on,
answer
Vas.
a completely
Tell
different.
him the
I'll
answer,
answer a
Vas.
completely different question that was on.
You
the
want a
list.
question in the meantime to kind of fill in?
No. Vas is going to think on his feet for once. Come on, Vas. Tell him the answer.
So, what question would I ask Archie or Percy?
Or Persis, yeah, up to you.
Okay, that's intriguing. I mean, I suppose, as Abir was saying, characters take on a life of their own as you go through a series, and sometimes they punch you in the face, and sometimes they do what they're told.
Right.
Persis, by her very nature, is a character who doesn't do what she's told. So, what I would really love to ask her is, are you in love with Archie Blackfinch? Because I haven't revealed that yet. And yet they've had things happen together but I've never revealed one.
Are we any closer to knowing the answer to that question in the fifth book?
We are closer to knowing that question in the fifth book.
Can I ask a question? Why would you ask that question of Persis before you would ask it of Archie?
Because Persis is the protagonist. She is the central character
No.
of this series. And, it's not that he's not important, but she's the one who's powering all these narratives.
Okay. Whereas my characters probably by now have equal billing, so it would be a different question. But I will ask a question of Sam, and it's a similar sort of question, but it's not quite the same because Sam has this affection for a woman called Annie Grant, who is an Anglo-Indian. And he hasn't done himself any favors by accusing of her of murder early on in the relationship, which never it's hard to come back from that. But he has tried gamely, and most of his attempts now just seem to be some sort of low-level guerrilla warfare against anybody else who might be interested in her. So I would ask Sam, what's going on? What is your strategy here? Why is your love life such a bin fire? And I've written it with, tremendous expertise and experience, as you can imagine, Paul. So yeah, similar question. What's going on? How are you going to solve this? We do it over whiskey. We do it over whiskey as well.
Well, naturally. I mean, that goes without saying, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, then a more, let's say an easier question to answer then. I hope it is anyway. If you were podcasting, who's the person you really love to get as a guest? Who's the one you really want?
Oh,
well, we've had Paul. We're doing something with Paul Burke, so that's ticked off.
That comes when I ask you what's your favorite podcast later.
I don't remember this question. Who would I?
I can see it. I've just pulled the questions up, and I can see it, Vas.
Okay,
sorry, Paul. Vas is getting a bit old. Shall I go first?
This one was there.
First. I've got an answer. You go first.
I would quite like to have John Grisham on. Because I've met him once, and he's everything you want John Grisham to be. He's classy, he's got the accent, he's got the tan, he's got the sports coat. He's everything you imagine a successful American thriller writer to be. And I think he'd be brilliant fun.
Yeah, I'd agree with John Grisham. But I'd tell you who I'd love to have on. I'd love to have Arnold Schwarzenegger on. Now that he's living, now that he's
we're just having anyone on.
Book then.
He's a writer. He wrote
Guide to Life or something, wasn't it? 10 rules
how
or
to
something.
Sort your life out. So I'd gift like 50 copies to Abir for a start. But wouldn't it be great? Because he'd feel honor bound. Schwarzenegger would feel honor bound to try and shoehorn in the words "I'll be back" into nearly every second sentence, and just watching.
No. We would.
And if he didn't, we would. Yeah,
that's
what you mean.
Yeah.
But we would be.
He actually lived for a long time in Vaseem's neck of the woods, didn't he? He lived in Romford.
He did indeed, yeah.
Did he?
People don't know this, that he was a world he was a
bodybuilding champion.
Bodybuilding champion. And there was a huge gym in East London in Romford where all the top
Is that the one you used?
No, it was
He can't open the door.
It was where all the top bodybuilders in the UK. So when he was living in the UK for a short time, he would use that gym, and they're still trying to trade off it 600 years later.
Here's an interesting fact. Two of the 80s biggest celebrities lived in Romford. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is one. Do you know who the other one is, Paul?
Steve Davis?
Correct.
Ah, there we are.
Correct. Steve Interesting Davis. So Romford was really happening in the 80s.
Get
Wasn't
a
it,
bonus
Vass?
if you know his nickname.
You
Interesting.
said it's not happening now then.
No, that's
Well, I'm
what
saying Vass lives down the road. You can draw your own
The
conclusions.
neighborhood's gone down recently, hasn't
You can
Steve
draw
Davis.
your own conclusions.
I will give you bonus points if you can name two of Steve Davis's famous nicknames.
Well, Steve Interesting Davis, but in fairness, Abir said that.
Yeah,
Something to do with being red hair.
the Ginger Magician.
The Ginger Magician there, right?
The Romford Robot. The Nugget.
The Nugget.
The
That's
Nugget.
the one. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah,
Well, we go down nostalgia street
was
now. Should we have a
literally-
little
and I make-
go into the 80s for a while?
I mean, but no disrespect, he was literally the most boring man on earth.
No, he was a
Other than Abir, of
fantastic.
course.
No, I disagree. I had a book called How to Be Really Interesting by Steve Davis, and it was one of the best things I read in my teenage years. It was written, there was one page which was just different dance moves, so you could cut them out and you could flick through them, and it would be Steve dancing. And it was brilliant. I modeled
I got a
myself
funny
on
feeling this says a lot more about you than Steve Davis's writing talent, I'm afraid. All right, then let me ask you a question. I'm sure everybody wants to know this one. Has it ever gone badly wrong when you've been doing the podcast? Come on.
Oh, yeah, there was
Who screwed up?
Worse than this.
It's one occasion that I can think of off the top of my head. We had Lord Archer on, we had Jeffrey Archer on, right? And he spent the whole time in character. I should point out this is totally in character. And he spent the whole time having a go at Vaseem and me about just any question we asked was stupid. Anything we said was wrong. And it was bizarre. But it was good. You knew it was the act, but it was fun, but it was difficult, wasn't it?
We had we had Dean Koontz on once as well, and he's a lovely.
Oh, he's been on twice. Dean's been on twice.
Yeah. Because he had so much fun the first time. He asked to come back on the second time.
Well, we called him Uncle Dinesh, didn't we? We gave him an Indian name. We called him Uncle Dinesh.
I interviewed him. He said, "I'll do any show." He said, "I won't do that Red Hot Chili Writers." He said, "Anything else?"
Because we gave him a quiz on dogs the second time around.
That's right.
Oh yeah, he likes his dogs, doesn't he?
He loves his dogs, and he runs a dog charity and all the rest of it. And we haven't seen him since.
Yeah. We went through a phase of doing quizzes with our guests, and Vass kept sort of skewing it so that the guests would get like really easy questions, and I'd get the most obscure questions in the world. And it was dreadful because I always ended up looking like an idiot. And
very hard.
Can you think of any other times when it went completely wrong, Vass?
Well, it's even when it goes wrong, it goes right because
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
People know what they're going to get when they come.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had the occasional one where the builders have suddenly started up outside somebody's house, and it's impossible to get past the building noises, that sort of thing. I forgot to record an episode one time, and luckily that was with Barry Forshaw and Victoria Selman. So I was able to go and apologize afterwards, but make them record it again. So. But I was comforted by that because I spoke to Frank Gardner, and he said, it could be worse. He said, I did it to George Bush. So I thought, okay, mine's not such a faux pas then.
I think we had a similar one. You remember, Vass, when you were in the studio and I was in a car with Mick Herron?
It was in the shower.
No, that was a different one. I wasn't in the shower. It just sounded like Mick Herron and I were in the shower, but we were actually in a car. And it was bizarre, wasn't it? Especially when Mick started taking his clothes off. That was really quite disconcerting. But yeah, that was a weird one because we kept cutting in and out, and Vass had to improvise. Didn't you, Vass?
Yeah.
You like improvising?
To be fair to Mick, he's always been lovely, and we had this wonderful episode that we did. Up in, I think it was Butte, wasn't it?
It was on Butte, yeah.
Oh, so the two times, I think he's terrified of our podcast because we did one episode in bloody Scotland, which we were recording at the festival,
right?
where we were making it very uncomfortable for people.
Oh, he walked out of that one, didn't he?
Well, he tried to walk out.
No, to be fair to him, he said he was going to another event, but
what were we discussing? Because Stu Turton ended up hiding behind a seat.
Yeah, that was one when we were discussing wokeness, and yes,
Oh, yes.
you had, but the one in Butte was good fun because we got people to rap. So we had Fiona Cummins, Anna Mazzola, and your man Mick. And I must say, Anna and Fiona were amazing. Fiona's rap was just out of this world. Uh, Mick refused to rap and instead did a poem. He wrote a poem and he read it in the style of Green Eggs and Ham. So that was interesting, but that was actually a car crash for us because there was one point where Fiona Cummins was doing her version of Stan by Eminem. But Stan in this instance was Vass and myself. And she had our names tattooed on her or written on her bosoms.
Yeah, hopefully not
in
tattooed.
Pen. Not to be fair, we haven't asked to check, so who knows, right? But that was interesting. That was an evening I ended up hiding behind the chair, remember? Yeah, we've had some fun times, to be fair.
I'm looking at this sheet, sorry. So I think we're going to ask you a question now, Paul.
Yes.
Apparently.
That wasn't in the rules.
Well, apparently.
We don't play by the rules, Paul.
We don't even know what the rules are. Okay.
Rules go out the window. Apparently, you've written a book on mastic asphalt laying. It's very
okay. Do you want to know where that comes from? Right. I said to Vaseem, right? I said to Vaz earlier, before we started this idea, I said, okay. So I said, you ask all these people questions. I said, how are you going to ask me a question if I tell you I've just written a book on mastic asphalt laying? So,
I know. Well, can I ask you a question?
I decided not to put that in the interview, but I tell you where it comes from. It comes from careers at school. When we were 15, they made us all do the same careers class. It didn't matter who was going to university or who was going to leave and do whatever. And they gave us this half-hour thing. And it was like, I want to be a mastic asphalt layer. And it sort of stuck with me forever since. I just have never forgotten that phrase.
Well, are you saying you haven't?
You're laughing at that. You're laughing at that, Paul.
So I haven't written that book. I haven't actually written that book. Well, and I apologize to anybody who is a mastic asphalt layer if they still do those now. Because
can I just say, look, you've seen the state of our roads. Do you really think you should be making fun of anybody laying asphalt? We need more of them. If you are a mastic asphalt layer out there, please, your country needs you.
Well, first of all, please forgive my colleague for being an ignoramus. Mastic asphalt goes on roofs. It doesn't go on roofs.
Is that right?
Even I know this.
Well, we need.
I mean, I appreciate the value of somebody who does potholes. I knew that. Got that straight away. Of course, yeah.
So is the mastic asphalt the stuff that goes on flat roofs?
Yep, that's the one.
Oh, that's terrible. That always leaks. No. Get a proper job. Fill potholes.
That's fun. I'll get that. I'll get a proper job sooner or later.
Yeah, not you. I was just talking to the mastic asphalt layers out there.
Some lino.
I'm not insulting mastic asphalt layers on my show.
Lino and super glue. That's what you need.
Lino and super glue.
Yeah,
that's like your sex life in a sentence, isn't it? My God, Vass. Too many secrets tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
How that works, but that's good.
This is edited, right? It's not live, is it, Paul? This is all can be all.
You wish. A bit late to find out it's live, isn't it?
There was another great question you had in that list of yours.
I did.
Therapy.
How the hell did that get in there?
What about therapy?
It's not fair. I haven't read the questions.
Yeah, but you're a lazy git. I mean, we can't legislate for that. No,
is it therapy then? Go on then. Is it therapy? This?
This
do you enjoy it as therapy? Not this.
You think this is therapy?
No. Podcasting.
I don't know. We enjoy it. We have a lot of fun, and it doesn't feel like work, except for me because I do the work. But you can see how much fun we have on this, and I think the people who come on quickly realize that it's a slightly different kind of podcast. It's not going to be entirely about
all the answers they prepared, everything they got ready for this serious chat is just out the window. There we go. Forget about it. All right, then one last question because we're going to.
I want to say my two thoughts on it is therapy in a way because it cheers me up. Whenever I'm feeling down, if I see Vass's slappable face, it cheers me up. I just think, God, could be worse. No, but it really does. It makes a difference. Just talking to him once every 2 weeks, talking to our guests as well. It really is. You can let off steam. We do let off a lot of steam, especially depends what Vass has had for dinner. But there's generally
Oh, look,
it's good. It is therapy.
we know that. Look, mental health is incredibly important, and the state of Abir's mental health needs a lot of work. I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you a couple of quick therapy jokes.
Go on.
Because I really like this. So,
did you prepare therapy jokes?
I did. I prepared therapy.
My God,
that's why you wanted that question in there.
Yeah, absolutely. A guy walks into a therapist's office wearing a see-through pair of shorts. So the therapist takes one look at him and he said, "Well, clearly I can see your nuts."
Okay.
And these are the ones you prepared, right?
You realize that that's going to be one of Abir's jokes for his book sales coming up.
Buy my book, please. Otherwise, I will have to use that joke, ladies and gentlemen.
My grief counselor was so good. When she died, I couldn't give a shit.
That's actually quite good. That's good.
One more for you. So the therapist says, your wife has complained that you never buy her flowers. What do you say to that? And the patient says, to be honest, I had no idea my wife even sold flowers.
Can I tell you a true story about flowers, right? So I got into trouble for buying my wife flowers. Because just because my favorite florist also sells petrol, apparently that's a bad thing. I mean,
I get a feeling I know where your favorite florist is. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you'd got a card with some other woman's name on it.
No. I gave your wife flowers before. I'm not doing that again. Anyway, what last question about next?
Because we're going to go to audience questions, by the way.
Is the audience still there?
Well, that's if they're still there and they still want to ask some questions. We'll go over to them. But one last question before that then. Is there a brilliant question that you've been asked on a podcast or a really rubbish question that stood out? Either of you?
I asked Mick Heron a really rubbish question when we were in the car that day. I said, "Where did you get your ideas from?" He just looked at me. I said, "Look, I've got nothing at this point. Put your trousers back on." Have we been asked a rubbish question?
I think people are too intimidated to ask us anything.
Really? Why would we intimidate anybody? Look at the state of us.
Because of this.
I mean, you've been wearing that shirt for the last 4 years. All your press photos are in that shirt.
A brand new shirt. What are you talking about?
What do you mean brand new from where? The charity shop?
I like grey shirts.
Yes.
That's a good thing for fashion these days, isn't it? You know, for the fashion industry, if you buy secondhand and all the rest of it.
If you turn them round, right? It's just camouflaged. It's just grey. Turn around, Vass.
Right.
At least I've got pants on.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm going to invite Sarah in, and she's going to let us in on some of the questions that the audience have for us. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Hello. It's been brilliant, and there are lots of questions in the chat.
Before we answer any questions, can I just point out to the audience that Sarah murders cactuses? You've murdered cactuses, don't you, Sarah?
I am. It's the great Aberystwyth cactus massacre in our house. Alex would like to know, he's curious to know how you found the podcast has helped you with your own writing, if it has.
Well, I would say two things. Firstly, it's certainly helped us to meet people across the industry, famous writers, and you know, it's got a base of listeners now. So obviously we plug our books at them relentlessly. But I think just talking to some of the best and most talented writers in the world, and also people who have long been our heroes, the ability to be able to talk to them as writers ourselves and to get stuff out of their brains about how they go about their business, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, Vass is absolutely right. It's opened doors to so many people that we wouldn't otherwise have met. To the extent that, you know, when I was writing this book, I managed, you know, I even before it was when it was just a draft, long before it was a proof, I sent it out to 5 or 6 writers that, you know, I had no right to send it to. I sent it to people like Lee Child and Mick Heron saying, please, can you tell me, is this any good? Can I fix this? And that's great. And that, I think a lot of that came through the podcast. Right?
Well, when you say opening doors, so for instance, we were invited to
open a door.
Well, amongst other things. So we were invited to judge the British Book Awards a couple of years ago, and after we'd done that with other judges, obviously, we were invited to present the award at the very, very swanky ceremony they have in the summer, and we were backstage, and Trini from Trini and Susanna showed up, and she sorted our ties out.
Yeah, she told me off.
She told him off for being sloppy, and she looked at my tie and said, "Your tie is perfect."
Yeah, but she thought you were an old age pensioner. She wasn't going to shout at you, right? I hope that answers Alex's question. So yeah, it does. It's made a difference. Less probably to our actual writing, but at least in terms of advice and meeting people in profile, it's been brilliant.
Gwendolen would like to know, are you plotters? And if you are plotters, do you plot an entire series, or is it one book at a time?
Oh, quick answer to that is I do like to plot each book, but not the whole series. I know the theme of the book, and then I try and do a reasonably good plot before I start. But as Abir said, things change, characters take over, plots have twists and turns that you don't expect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar. I have a roadmap. It'll be like a 2-page skeleton of what I expect to happen, and then I will flesh out the first third of that as I go along. And when I'm about a third of the way through, I'll flesh out the next third. So I do plot. I tried writing one book without plotting. It just ended up a mess. And so, yeah, I plot. But as Vaseem says, I think it's very hard to plot a series. You can plot an overall narrative arc, but not much more than that. I think you have to plot each book separately, if that's the way you're going to go.
I've got a related question from the Heart Room, which is, how do you manage timelines from book to book?
Well, that's a really good question. Vas, why don't you give a sensible answer, and then I'll tell you where I went wrong.
Well, you went wrong with that beard for a start, but let's not. Timelines between books. I think what both of us do is, so Abir's doing 1 year at a time with his timeline. I'm trying to keep it fairly close so that the next case happens a few months after. So you'll see the monsoon as a background in one of my books, and then you'll see the period after the monsoon, which is so hot that elephants melt in the streets. I think that timeline is something that you don't really want to get too bogged down in, certainly within an individual novel. It's just part of the fabric of the book.
Yeah, I agree with Vas. I write essentially in real time. So if it's 2 years since my last book came out, it'll be 2 years will have moved on in the timeline. I did make the mistake. I mean, the exception to that was between books 3 and 4, between Smoke and Ashes and Death in the East. At the end of book 3, Sam says he's going off to a Buddhist monastery rather, to get a cure for his opium addiction. But by the time I came to write book 4, I'd forgotten it was a Buddhist monastery, and it became a Hindu ashram. So I had to go back and rewrite a little bit, that when he turns up, he realizes, oh, this isn't a monastery, it's an ashram. Whoever told me to go here, the doctor that recommended it, was wrong. So yeah,
but it'll do.
But you have to remember what you wrote in the last book, otherwise it can bite you.
So you don't have kind of series Bibles that you set out?
Vas might. I'm obviously not organized
Too much
enough.
work in that, isn't there?
No. Our editors have, and editors will have a list of all of the things so that when they're editing, they can remember.
Is that right?
Yeah. You must have been sent one, surely.
No.
Not your main editor, the proof, the copy
editor.
Yeah, they will have a Bible. Otherwise, they'll get lost with series characters, the minor characters, particularly dates of birth and all that kind of stuff.
God, I've never seen that. That's really good. I'm impressed. You've impressed me, Vas. Well done.
That must mean you get it right.
Well,
Vas, tell them about the Jeep. Tell them about the Jeep.
Oh, I don't always get it right. So the Jeep that he's talking about. So in Midnight at Malabar House, I have Persis riding around in a police Jeep, and somebody wrote to me and he said, "Oh, dear Mr. Khan, I absolutely love this book. But on page 72, line 18, you've got her in a Jeep and you've got her winding down the window. And I regret to inform you, sir, that in 1950, this model of Jeep did not have a window." And he was perfectly right. So, kudos to him. I wrote back to say thank you for that info, and then I wrote to my editor and say, can you please make sure I never input another window on this Jeep again?
And what happened?
Yeah, I put another window in.
The next book, and the same guy.
It was a prototype. It was a prototype model.
No, to be fair, we took it out in the draft in the stage. I'd forgotten.
Donna has asked, have your readers ever spotted a message or a character trait that you didn't intend when you wrote it?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, quite often. Not, yeah, you tend to see reviewers. Reviewers will see things, go, "Oh, this is a metaphor for X, Y, Z," and you're going, "Actually, yeah, it is." I'm glad somebody saw that.
It started off as a pancake, but yeah, if you want to call it a metaphor for the world.
Yeah, I think that happens. People do. People put their own spin on things, right? And that's good. That's good. That's what you want. You want them to. At the same time, you do get upset when people don't get it, when people don't get the bigger themes, because you can't say anything because obviously the book hasn't worked for them, and you just think, well, you can't like write to you go, no, you're wrong because this is what it's about. So yeah, I think it's nice when people read nice things into your books, and for me, the bigger issue is when people don't read what you were intending.
Yeah. I mean, it's subjective, right? We've been lucky, we've had 10 years with the same publishers.
It's been that long. God, we're getting old. Well, you're getting old.
And we've got audiences now that are baked in, so we know that our books will do a certain amount of business, and hopefully our editors won't kick us out.
No, we don't take them for granted.
We get negative reviews too, right? We get negative reviews. I mean, I still
from each other.
Well, I still remember one review for my first book all those years ago where it was quite hurtful because I wasn't used to the industry then. And again, I think the chap said something, this book is too slow. I don't have enough years left to live to get to the end.
Yeah, I said sorry for that, didn't I? I got one that said this book reads like it's been written by an accountant. And I was an accountant at the time, so it was pretty spot on, actually, as criticism goes. Oh dear, we're getting so old, aren't we, Vass? We're like the old men of
but accountants for a long time. So I have an accounts degree as well, and I was a management consultant. And I've heard that accountants, on average, live longer than the average lifespan.
Yeah, but is that the mean?
Unless they come from Glasgow.
Yeah, exactly. Unless they're from Glasgow.
Sarah.
Anne has got what might be a slightly dangerous question.
Oh, good. We love danger.
Who's been your favourite guest?
Oh, that's a good question. Hang on. When you say Anne, is it Anne Cleves who's asked the question? Just so
no,
we know.
Okay. Anne Patrick.
Okay. Right. Who do you think she's been your favourite guest, Vass?
Well, first of all, I just want to say to Anne that we laugh in the face of danger.
We generally run away in the face of danger, to be fair.
Yeah, well, we laugh as we're running away, obviously.
More of a panicked laugh, yes.
Well, I think Anne has a special place in our hearts because she was the very first person who agreed to be on our podcast. So because she agreed and because she was so bloody famous, after that, everybody else felt, oh, okay, well, if Anne's gonna take a risk and be on this Pair of Idiots podcast,
she was on it. Val came on very, very early. I think
Val was, I think, second or third episode. So.
Yeah, and I think in terms of favorite guests, there's so many that have made us laugh. It's always nice when you get a guest who surprises you. So you expect them to be a certain way because they write serious books or they write dark books, and you meet them and they're just a complete laugh riot. I love that. I prefer that. I mean, Vass, you get turned on by the clever ones, don't you? Like the economists and stuff like that. The ones that have puerile humor like me are my favorite. But yeah, I don't think we can name somebody who is, because we've had so many. I don't think we can name a favorite guest. There are definitely people that we've loved to have on twice or three times, and others where we think, well, maybe no, not do that again. But we're not naming names there.
Do we have time for one more, Paul?
Absolutely.
Go on, then. That was a quick one. Go on.
Okay. A nice quick one from Gwentlian. She wants to know who you're reading right at the moment.
That's a good question. Vass?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer because I'm normally reading about 5 different books at the same time. I'll tell you what I've enjoyed recently, actually. I will tell you what I've enjoyed. Um, Joe Furness. Joe Furness has written a book called Dead Mile. I think it's coming out soon. And this book is I've read every kind of locked room mystery. This one is different. It's
Right.
it's a locked traffic mystery.
Oh,
So
interesting.
what you've got is a cop on a stretch of highway where there's big walls on either side and it's absolutely gridlocked. And then there's a dead body in one of the cars. And so clearly somebody has murdered this person while locked in this traffic. And so she has to get out of her car and she has to sort of do the whole policey thing within that constricted space to figure out who
That's
did it.
interesting. I like that. I'm reading The Second Murderer by Denise Mayna, which is a Raymond Chandler novel. So it's it's essentially the estate of Raymond Chandler has asked her to write a Philip Marlowe novel, and it's Philip Marlowe for the 21st century, and it's brilliant. And if I can just say, if this isn't too sacrilegious, I think it's better than Chandler. I have to say, it's brilliant. Best novel I've read this year in the last 12 months. Brilliant.
Wow.
No,
I'm also reading a biography of Lavrenti Beria, the guy from the KGB,
the nice one.
which is less nice, shall we say?
Right. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. The end this session, pen to pod, or wrangling cats, as it turned out to be, as it actually happened.
Angling cactuses.
Thank you, everybody, anyway, because there were some really great questions there. But as I said, sadly, we do have to close now. So thank you to Abir and Vaseem and Sarah for the questions there at the end. To everyone watching here in Wales and around the world. And please note, next year, the festival will be held in Abergavenny again, from the 25th to the 27th of April. And it will be lovely to see people there. I can certainly promise you a very warm welcome, not just from the festival, but from the town itself. We had a great time last year. So, Nostar, good evening. Thank you again to everybody for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.